Here, Locke reaches his most radical conclusion, the climax toward which his entire theory has been building. When government becomes tyrannical, the people have the right to resist and overthrow it. This directly repudiates Hobbes and justified the glorious revolution that brought Locke back to England. What is tyranny? Locke defines it as exercise of power beyond right, power used for purposes other than those that justified government's creation. Tyranny occurs when rulers pursue their own private interests rather than the public good, when they violate natural rights they were supposed to protect, when they act without authority or beyond the limits of their legitimate power. Crucially, tyranny can exist under any form of government. A democracy can be tyrannical if the majority violates minority rights. An aristocracy can be tyrannical if rulers serve themselves rather than the public. A monarchy can be tyrannical if the king exceeds lawful bounds. Tyranny is defined by how power is used, not by who holds it. When does government dissolve? Locke distinguishes between dissolution of society and dissolution of government. Society dissolves only through conquest or internal collapse so severe that people return to the state of nature. This is rare and catastrophic. Government dissolves much more easily when it betrays the trust placed in it by society. Government can dissolve from within when the legislature is altered, when those meant to make laws are prevented from doing so, or when the executive refuses to convene the legislature, or when elections are corrupted so representatives don't actually represent the people. It dissolves when rulers deliver the people to foreign powers.
Most importantly, government dissolves when it systematically acts contrary to its trust, when it invades property rights, when it rules by arbitrary will rather than established law, when it uses force without authority. In all these cases, the government has destroyed itself by betraying its purpose. The people don't dissolve government. Government dissolves itself through tyranny. But who judges when tyranny exists? Locke faces the problem he earlier identified in the state of nature, everyone being their own judge. If every person decides individually when resistance is justified, haven't we returned to the state of nature? Doesn't this invite chaos? Locke's answer is multi-layered. First, people aren't likely to resist for light and transient causes, as the American Declaration of Independence would later echo. Humans are naturally averse to rebellion, preferring to bear familiar ills rather than risk chaos. Only systematic abuse, not isolated mistakes, will provoke resistance. Second, when tyranny is clear and sustained, most people will recognize it. Judgment isn't individual, but collective. The people as a body recognize oppression and act together. This isn't each person deciding for themselves. It's the community reaching common judgment. Third, the alternative, accepting tyranny because resisting might cause disorder, is worse. Hobbes argued that even bad government beats the state of nature, so resistance is never justified. Locke responds that tyranny is itself a form of the state of nature. It's ruled by force without right, exactly what government was meant to prevent. Submitting to tyranny means accepting the very condition government was created to overcome.
Moreover, who truly causes disorder when tyranny is resisted? Locke argues it's the tyrant, not those resisting. By violating the trust placed in them, by using power beyond right, tyrants declare themselves enemies of the people and at war with society. Resistance is self-defense, not rebellion. This is revolutionary doctrine in the most literal sense. It provides theoretical justification for overthrowing governments, for armed resistance against rulers, for replacing one regime with another. And it's not just abstract theory. Locke wrote it to justify actual revolution, the removal of James II and establishment of William and Mary with new constitutional limitations. But Locke tries to limit revolution's scope. He insists that resistance is justified only against systematic tyranny, not against particular unjust acts or bad policies. He emphasizes that people are naturally reluctant to rebel, so rulers shouldn't fear that acknowledging a right to revolution will produce constant instability. And he argues that recognizing this right actually increases stability by warning rulers against tyranny and providing a safety valve for intolerable oppression. Whether these limitations work is questionable. Once you acknowledge a right to revolution, who decides when the threshold is met? Locke says the people, but people disagree. The American Revolution showed Lockean theory in action. Colonists argued that systematic British tyranny justified independence. But loyalists disagreed, arguing that British rule, whatever its faults, didn't rise to tyranny. Both sides invoked Locke. The right to revolution remains Locke's most radical contribution, and his sharpest challenge to Hobbes. For Hobbes, once you create the sovereign, you're stuck with it. Resistance returns you to the state of nature, which is worse than any government. For Locke, tyrannical government is itself a state of nature, and resistance is justified self-defense. Political obligation is conditional, revocable, and ultimately dependent on government serving the purposes that justify its authority.